Most of these AI companies are sitting on commodity claims data. So it's what everybody has access to. So there's no differentiation there. And then now you start bringing agentic AI in, right? And that's saying, okay, I'm going to take what I learned from the generative side and now I'm going to automate a business process. Okay. Again, when you're sitting on commodity data, which is not novel or new, you're going to be very limited in what you can automate. In fact, what we're finding for our data is a lot of the AI solutions that automate are the ones making the mistakes. And guess what? A human has to still come in behind to clean up the mistake.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by Write For Me, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Matt Seefeld, CEO at MedEvolve. Matt, how are you today?
I'm good, Andrew. I'm glad we could spend some time together and talk about a lot of different topics.
Excellent. I appreciate you spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. Please tell us a bit about yourself and about MedEvolve.
Well, just I could take half a show on myself. I'm an identical twin. It kind of plays into my career here, which I'll get to. I was born in Chicago, grew up in San Francisco. Started my career in management consulting. I was with PwC and Deloitte for quite a few years, trying to solve complex healthcare problems. Really, always been focused on the revenue cycle side, or when I see a doctor or go to a hospital, how do I get paid for the services rendered, right? It's kind of an important piece in any business. I started right around 2006. I actually started, I was only 29. I know it seems silly, but I started thinking there has to be a better way to get information out of these transactional systems that are used to bill medical claims. And with that information could start to look at the effectiveness of people. A lot of the mistakes that are made in healthcare is the wasted touches, touches trying to get claims paid that do not result in an outcome. And that's very expensive to the profit margin of these organizations. So what does a 29-year-old with no capital do? Well, he packs up his condo in Atlanta, Georgia, and fills his 4Runner. I love that 4Runner, my 2000 4Runner, and I drove cross country, slept on my best friend from college's couch for 6 months and started a business. Did not realize that 2007 and 8 would be a little bit of a recession there. So for those of you that are listening, you do remember those days. I think the best story was American Express called me one day and said, your credit line has been dropped to $1,000. And I said, I can't even buy an airplane ticket with $1,000. So needless to say, I learned a few things during those years, and I was able to have a successful exit to a public company in 2012. But a lot of the things that I learned, and we'll probably get to more entrepreneurial topics, is what does it take to survive in an environment where you're not capitalized, right? All the forces are against you, and you're trying to create a software solution that drives enormous value, but the buyer doesn't always see that value. And so it taught me a lot of lessons that I've now applied really throughout my career, and even here at MedEvolve, as the CEO of this company, is really taking what I developed years ago. I always say putting it on steroids and now delivering it into a market that is absolutely in dire straits, right? Nobody has to read a lot of newspapers or articles to see the state of healthcare. When costs keep going up and reimbursement keeps going down and half the dollar comes from a consumer who may or may not be able to pay their bill, that is not a good business to be in, right? Unfortunately, it impacts every single human in the United States who's trying to access some form of healthcare.
Yeah, I know it from the consumer side and have a family member as a surgeon for 30, 40 years. And I don't understand how the industry runs at this point. As a consumer, you go to a doctor, 45 days later, you get a piece of paper in the mail that says this is not a bill. And then maybe a few months down the road, you get notified that your insurance company has paid your medical provider 20, 30 cents on the dollar. So they're getting their money in about 120 days, and it's a fraction of what they're asking for. I don't know how the entire equation works. Bless you for wading your way into that muck and mud. When did MedEvolve start? When did they open their doors?
MedEvolve actually was founded in the late 90s by a couple of orthopedic surgeons in Little Rock, Arkansas. And we still have those founders today. They're not active members in the company. They're Dr. Heffley is our chairman of the board, and Dr. Bowen sits on the board as well. They actually started a company out of necessity, which I love the story, is that the billing systems back then were not good. So they built their own billing system. And then they started to be asked by some of their technology clients, hey, will you do the medical billing for me? I don't want to do any of that nonsense. And so they started a revenue cycle services company. So I love their entrepreneurial spirit that started this company so many years ago. But like any company, right, if you don't want to be Kodak or Blockbuster, you've got to evolve. So I came on board in 2017 to really look at the business. And what I saw was a commoditized business that was highly competitive with much larger organizations with much deeper pockets. And I said, unless you're going to sell this today, we need to now build something much more special, much more targeted at improving profit margin, much more targeted that will allow us to put our software on top of lots of billing systems, not just MedEvolve. And so that was my task, was from about 2019 through now, is building out this now AI-driven solution that really sits on top of any billing platform out there and really looks at the effectiveness of people. And it really looks at how you hold people accountable, because while your example, the doctor's getting 35 cents on the dollar, the doctor's getting paid, 3-4 months down the line, that doctor's also paying a tremendous amount of administrative cost for people who are not efficient, right? And it's because the systems that have been used for decades were never designed to look at effectiveness of people. They were designed to get a bill out the door. And while that worked when I started my career, and it worked in 2005 and it worked in 2010, and some would say it's working in 2015 and even 2020, what happened? COVID hits. Everybody wants to work from home. You have a new generation of individuals who are not motivated necessarily the same way that prior generations are. And you have a payer community who prides themselves on not paying. So when you have the misalignment of the consumer of healthcare services, the provider of services, and the payer for services that have never been aligned in this country, that business will never survive. And that's just the brutality of healthcare. And unfortunately, our current administration is actually hurting this piece. What's happening is you have a lot of patients now, a lot of people that are going to get kicked off of their insurance, right? Medicaid, for example. You have commercial managed care companies who are supporting managed Medicaid, managed Medicare. They're going to stop offering those solutions. So we're moving into a world that if you don't have a high enough net worth to pay for your portion of the bill, good luck finding medical care. I was on with a group earlier this morning who's already seen a huge uptick in bad debt write-offs coming because people are using the emergency room as their primary care clinic, and they have no ability to pay. So how do we? This is a catastrophic pandemic of proportions that's going to impact every single human in the U.S. But nobody's giving a really good, if you think of like the White House is doing, we're going to provide incentives for more digital health. We're going to provide more incentives for more clinical data exchange. Well, where's the incentives to actually keep people in business, right? So I worry about the next 10 years in this industry. But what I love about MedEvolve is that we're trying to stay ahead of all that. We're trying to make sure our clients maximize what margin they can so that they can provide services to a broader mix of people. They can stay independent if they choose to stay independent. They don't have to sell to a private equity firm or to a hospital, right? And for the providers of services, we want to give them the ability to create the businesses and continue the businesses they want. I can't say, even no matter how perfect we become as a company, it still may not be enough. I think at some point, personally, the government is going to have to step in and start doing some major regulations on the insurance companies, the supply companies, and really look at the reimbursement models, especially for providers of services and hospitals in the rural areas, right? It's the harder to get to areas that are impacting the most.
Now, let's talk about your clients for a second. Are you serving larger hospital networks, more individual doctors? What verticals are you servicing at MedEvolve?
Yeah, so MedEvolve, because it started out in the surgical specialty space because of our founders, right? Primarily, we were in that space. So, your surgical specialties, your orthopedics, your urology, ophthalmology, those areas. So we've very much expanded our addressable market in the last 3 years. I've been very intentional with that. We have now moved into the hospital space. I like the small, mid-sized rural hospitals. They're the ones that are feeling the most pain, and they're the ones that are very at risk of going out of business. And then those communities will suffer, and that's a big concern of mine. The other area that we've done very well in is the BPO companies. So these are your large RCN businesses that do medical billing for their clients. Even though there's a whole push to offshore everything, right? I was on with a group this week. He's like, Sri Lanka, Guatemala, Philippines, India, like Eastern Europe, like all of these people all over the world that you can pay less. But unfortunately, the effectiveness of those individuals on claims adjudication is much worse than people here in the US. And that's not a ding on those individuals. It's just the complexity of medical reimbursement in this country. There's only so much you can do if you're outside of the US and you don't quite understand that environment. So it's the BPOs are very, very important. I think a lot of health systems and hospitals and physician groups will continue to look at outsourcing as a cheaper way, but you got to be effective at the work. Otherwise, you're paying maybe 1 or 2% less, but you're actually losing 5 to 7% more, right? And so we have to keep that in mind as we look at those options.
What are the most common problems you're solving for your clients? I guess I didn't understand that you layer on top of a BPO as opposed to sort of replacing them entirely.
Yeah, no, I actually just exited our services business. We found an amazing buyer of our rev cycle company. They are now part of a much larger company who frankly believes in our technology. That was one of the reasons I pushed the board in that direction. Was this is a really amazing individual who's got the same passion for building and scaling services companies as I do with building and scaling tech companies to really help providers stay in business. So we're agnostic in terms of our software that we sit on top of. I think that's an important strategy that we've deployed. But the biggest problems it's the common ones, believe it or not, right? I'd say about 50 to 60% of denials in healthcare come from mistakes that happened either prior to service or at the point of service. It's, I didn't get the authorization. I did not verify the benefits to make sure Andrew had the benefits for the service I'm about to render. I did not get the coordination of benefits correct, right? My primary insurance was wrong. That was actually secondary. It's simple things, right? Coding mistakes, billing errors, right? It's things but then it requires on the account receivable side, somebody that's knowledgeable to then go fix those problems and get those claims rebuilt. But keep in mind, the payers do not give you a lot of time to A, find the problem, and B, refile it. So there's a lot of timely filing denials that are just writing off. I mean, we see anywhere from 3 to sometimes 7 or 8% write-offs on average. So think about that, right? You bill $1 and you expect $1 and 7 to 8% of that dollar is gone because of a mistake you made. That's a pretty big hit to your P&L. That's a pretty big hit to your profit margin, right? So we're here, delivering a solution that allows you to recoup that money because you identify the problem first, and then you identify how effective people are at preventing the problem or at least solving it after it's occurred. Those two things that we're doing now as a company has really changed the course of clients that work with us. And now we bring in this new future of generative AI that we're working on, the agentic AI automation. And that's where we as a company are continuously focused is automation. But remember, as I tell everybody, North American will never be a humanless revenue cycle. There are a lot of companies out there touting that, and those are created by people who may be well-funded, but they've never spent a day in the revenue cycle. When you have third-party payers in our world, you will never have a humanless revenue cycle. So there's no such thing as all humans are going away. That may work in manufacturing, that may work in call centers. It's not going to work in healthcare. I think we can get more automated, absolutely. But you're still going to need humans getting involved much of the time to try to get the money you deserve.
Well, again, we've talked about this offline before. AI is a fabulous tool, but at the end of the day, it is just a tool, and it still has to be delivered with expertise and, artisan craftsmanship and, human intelligence, especially in the medical field. I've been the victim of single-digit mistakes in coding and
Yep.
barking back and forth for 8 months to get it cleaned up. Something as simple as a single digit on a pediatric blood test code, right? I mean,
Yep.
but this is, entry level stuff in your world, but on the receiving end, it's just an annoyance for us.
Well, it's a consumer breakdown, right? I mean, people always say you have the best service in the world, you love your doctor, but where the anger and frustration comes out is at the billing process. So, they always say if you have a bad experience, you tell 10 people. So, a provider is doing the best they can for you and the best clinical outcomes possible, but the financial outcomes are terrible. And that's now a consumer who's upset, or they're posting on social media. It's hurting brand. I mean, it was the one digit.
Yep.
It's the one digit that keeps getting missed. I mean, those are the things. It's a bad interaction on a phone call. Somebody's frustrated for their day. They don't want to explain why a bill is the way it is, right? They're not polite. So it's hard. I think the AI pieces, we were talking about this and socializing it before we started, is there's such a misunderstanding of AI. When I started my company, Interpoint, big data was the term, right? It was business intelligence, big data, right? Every billboard at a trade show had it on there. And most of these companies, there's like glorified pivot tables in Microsoft Excel. I'm like, that's not really data visualization, right? But AI, it's scary. I think that, MedEvolve clients create their own data set when they interact with our software. And that data set is novel. That data set is millions, tens of millions, and growing every single day as we continue to have clients engage in our software, trying to get these claims paid. But reason I bring it up is that when you think of generative AI, and so that's AI that's going to sit on a large language model, sit on a data set and start to learn from that data set. Most of these AI companies are sitting on commodity claims data. So it's what everybody has access to. So there's no differentiation there. And then now you start bringing agentic AI in, right? And that's saying, okay, I'm going to take what I learned from the generative side and now I'm going to automate a business process. Okay. Again, when you're sitting on commodity data, which is not novel or new, you're going to be very limited in what you can automate. In fact, what we're finding for our data is a lot of the AI solutions that automate are the ones making the mistakes. And guess what? A human has to still come in behind to clean up the mistake. So I really, really want to impress on listeners is that, if you're sitting there on your phone and you're going through ChatGPT or any of these, solutions, that's great. Look, it's hyper efficient, but it's only grabbing what's commonly out there for you. Right. Those are my kids, by the way. But it's only able to grab, what's out there, right? What it's not able to grab is a novel data set that's unique. And so we're actually getting approached by a lot of AI companies asking if they could have tap into our de-identified human data to make their solution smarter, which is intriguing to me, right? I mean, I haven't said no yet. I'm still at not now.
There's a HIPAA compliance conversation to be.
Yeah, there's data exchange is all. Yeah, data exchange is it's all about that, right? And I think the clinical data exchange has done very well over the years, but financial data exchange has not. And there's no mandates coming from the White House to make financial data more available for companies like us to be able to gain access to it to drive better niche solutions for our customers. And a lot of these EMR platforms, they try to lock it down. They don't want to share anything because they feel like it's a competitive edge. It's like, so you have clients who are spending a ton of money on these billing platforms and they're losing a ton of money and they don't have a way to work with really cool companies, that are doing something that parent company is never going to do. I've been building these types of solutions since 2003. I built one on an Access database when I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I mean, it was crazy and it worked. I mean, all this cash is coming in, people are held accountable. And here we are in 2025, and these large EMR companies still don't get it. The healthcare operates always a month behind. If you go talk to the largest health system out there or large groups and you say, show me what you look at every month, they're going to send you this massive month-end report package that takes probably a week to put together. And then you're going to say, what do you take from that? And most of the time, nobody even reads it. So you're putting all this time and energy into a report package that's a month old now. And nobody's even acting on that data. Meanwhile, we bring data to your fingertips in real time that you act on it, you improve your margin 20%. Right? Healthcare still runs in this. I was joking. One of my coach in college was Army Special Forces, and he always talked to me about military strategy. He's like, look, when you're in those types of environments, you got to work the problem. He's like, and by the way, this is how I run companies. Like, I'm going to make decisions and be decisive based on the best information I have at the time. Sometimes it's the wrong decision, and so then you work the problem, keep working the problem alongside healthcare. I mean, it's like they're so fanatic about how bad things are, they don't even have time, or they don't think they have time to sit back for a moment and look at what the real problems are. I was talking to a large health system, I won't name names, and they had McKinsey in there, big McKinsey Consulting, right? This very strategic strategy firm. And I have a lot of friends that work there, so there's no ding on that. But he said, well, McKinsey put this report together for us with 70 initiatives that we're supposed to work on to improve our profit margin. I said, 70 initiatives? I said, if you use my solution for 1 month, in about 5 minutes, I could tell you the 3 initiatives that you need to drive the majority of your margin improvement for the next 18 to 24 months. And it's just like, that's part of the problem, right? You have $1 trillion consulting industry that makes a lot of money by going and telling these groups what they should do, but then they leave and nothing gets done. And it's that's scary. That's scary for these provider groups.
I think you may have already just answered this question, but what is the biggest differentiator for MedEvolve? What makes you stand out amongst your competitors?
I mean, the biggest thing, and I didn't even realize it at the time until probably about 6 months ago when we moved on to a new analytics platform. We left Microsoft's Power BI and we moved on to this amazing company, ThoughtSpot. They bring conversational AI, all these things. And what I started to realize is it's actually the new data that's created in our software that then gets actually analyzed. And then it's the novel algorithms that we're now building in that platform. An example would be human works a claim, right? Does a payment come in? Yes or no? Simple question, right? It didn't come in. Okay, why? Right? Another human works a claim. Payment came in. What did that person do different than the first person? What was different in the action they took? So I look at us as a data company. I look at us as a company that is creating a very, very specialized data asset that when it's combined with all the commodity stuff that's available, right? And that's running through generative AI and it's running through agentic AI automation is going to give the best chance for our clients to improve their margin to the best of their ability, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Not to mention benchmarks, right? We just created our first white paper and published this summer on a new set of industry benchmarks that the industry doesn't have. What we've learned is healthcare operates in these worlds of archaic lagging indicators. AR days is a prime example. AR days is a measurement of how quickly you get paid. Well, I can tell you, you can play with the data points to make your AR days look as good as you want to be. It's easy, right? It's like, I had a situation once where a client was writing off a portion of their AR at the end of the month to make the AR days look better. And then on the first part of the month, they brought the AR back on. I mean, that's probably not commonplace, but again, I can make a look. Here's the thing that we bring to the table, right? We bring these leading indicators now. So like I have indicators like, for example, how many claims are produced, go out the door and get paid with the human never getting involved, right? The industry sits at 40 to 55%, which is terrible. Our clients are starting to achieve 80 to 85%. So what is that doing? It's reducing your labor costs to get outcome. First touch resolution rate is a big one for us. I call on an insurance, find out what's wrong, take action, payment comes in. Industry sits at about 60%, meaning is that there's a lot more touches by humans it takes to get paid. Our clients are now achieving 85 to 90+%. What does that mean? Less people, better outcomes. Wasted touches is another thing. If you have 100,000 touches by humans in a revenue cycle, it is, we know with certainty about 65 to 85% of those touches were wasted, meaning nothing that individual did changed the AR. That is the scariest of all, Andrew. We're talking, like I was just doing a deal with a client. They have 30 FTEs all onshore making $23 an hour. And I said that it's 65% of your touches are wasted and you reduce those by even half. It was $500,000 in just labor cost savings in the first 6 months. So $1 million. Yeah, $500,000. So ROI is huge, right? I mean, it's like, I'm going to give this back to you. But the biggest thing is awareness. You have to have the awareness of the why the problem occurred. Why did a human have to look at it to get the claim paid? And then you need to actually act on that information to go fix the problem. And a lot of times it's a people issue, a process issue, or a technology gap, right? But that's where I can give you the best intel in the world. You still have to act on it. And then you have to have ways to measure results. So it's a very simple model, but it's hard industry to sell to. I joke when people, I don't understand why it's so hard to sell in healthcare. I'm like, do you want me to be honest? It's because you're selling a very sophisticated idea to an unsophisticated buyer and an unsophisticated industry. And by the way, I don't mean dumb. These are very smart people that run these organizations. But look what they're dealing with all day long. I mean, they're dealing with payers that don't pay, labor costs going up, people want more money, everyone's working virtually, ERs are exploding with low level care patients. I empathize with them because they are in the fray constantly. So a guy like me comes and says, hey, I got a solution, easy to install and could free up 30% of your costs. They want to believe it, but they have 16 other priorities that they were told by a consulting firm that they need to focus on. And unfortunately, 95% of the time, those are the wrong priorities. And that's troubling for this industry.
Again, as a spectator, they lean on consultants so much because they're not taught these business skills in medical school. I've never understood that. I find that reprehensible. You can go get a $500,000 education, and at the end of it, yes, you can ply the craft of medicine in your specific field, but you're not necessarily taught how to read a contract, how to launch a practice, how to sustain a practice, how to turn a profit and run a business, and all these things that are, I'm sorry, it is part of the job, right? So at least for somebody, it should be.
And they still don't. I joke with my twin brother. My identical twin was out here last week, moving his daughter into college here, and my niece. And so we had a lot of hours together. And he's an ER physician, and he's a medical director at a small regional hospital up in New Hampshire. And we were talking about, what he's now seeing coming through his emergency room alone. And we were joking. I mean, the guy went to UCLA, right? Then he went to Penn State Medical School. Then he does residency at UCLA. He's got all this training, all this debt, all of these things. Amazing doctor. But if you asked him what a P&L was, or if you asked him, how does his procedures convert to money and what a payer mix is, he doesn't know. And so these young people that are going to med school now today, I tell them, I said, make sure it's a Hippocratic oath. Like, you want to sit and help people. Do not go into medicine today because you think that just like your grandfather or your father or your mother who is making all this money, it's not there anymore. And that's not a reason to not go, but let's have real expectations here. When I have friends in my neighborhood who are in their mid 60s that are still practicing medicine because they can't afford to retire yet, that shows you where the industry's headed. And so, like I said, this is not a long strategy, right? We do not have decades left in this model, right? We have years, and the question is it what companies, are going to help rise up to really smooth out those years? MedEvolve, I believe, is a market leader there. And then when do we start to get real business people in government, not lobbyists and not these morons that are, running around, trying to protect commercial managed care payers and, big drug companies and big supply companies that are just sucking out the margin, but somebody is going to take a practical business view of this industry that's impacting every human in the US. And until that day comes, I mean, wait times to go see an elective surgeon, like a surgeon, to go see like an orthopedic surgeon is now longer in many places than it would be to see one in a socialized country like Canada, UK. You can get in faster. You could go to Canada and you probably get in faster to get a primary care visit and faster to go see the shoulder surgeon about your torn labrum than you can here, like in the US.
Hey,
crazy, right?
Yeah. Perspective is everything. It's always greener on the other side. I speak to Canadians who think that they'd rather have our system. I know plenty of Americans who'd rather have theirs.
Yeah.
But I got family members who are on long waiting lists for specialists and procedures and things. And that wasn't my perception of how medicine is delivered in a socialized country. But hey, I don't think anybody has nailed it yet. Right. We have
nobody's nailed it. No,
we have this perspective, and there are certain countries in Europe that, some of the Scandinavian countries seem to have it dialed a lot better in than we do, than Canada does for that matter. But I don't think there's a perfect solution out there yet.
Well, it's also, I mean, those countries you're paying a lot more in taxes so that you have a lot more of that nature, right? So, here in the US, the capitalist, United States, I mean, hell, I live in San Diego where I feel like half my dollar's gone before I sneeze. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
and then I got potholes, on the street. I'm like, I don't know what's happening right now, right? But this is a real look. It's a real problem. It's impacting all Americans. It's going to really accelerate impacting certain Americans. And the one thing, I'll just bring up, because I don't think people are realizing this, is AI is taking jobs. And when jobs are taken, especially for the lower level jobs, those people become uninsured, and those people will not qualify for certain programs based on some of the things that this government's doing. And therefore, guess what? They're going to start consuming healthcare resources in emergency rooms again. So there's a whole nother wave of uncompensated care that nobody's quite talking about yet that's slowly happening. So there's a perfect storm coming out there. And that's why I love working with all provider groups and rev cycle companies. But I really, really am going to focus our business in the hospital space as we look at the next year and beyond, because I think those are the ones that have to get help. I do not want to see communities lose. I mean, if my brother's hospital were to go out of business, you're driving probably an hour or two to Massachusetts or Dartmouth. I mean, you're not going to just walk down the street to a provider anymore. Like, that's a major issue for a community that's trying to, have healthcare services. And they're not alone. And even the big ones, the for-profit systems, they're losing $10-20 million a year. That group I talked about that had the McKinsey report, they'll probably lose $50 million this year. That's for profit. I'm like, next year it's 100 million? Like, but you think they're going to go from 50 to 0? Like, what world are you living in? You're going to go work on 70 initiatives, man.
70. Yeah.
I got 3, maybe 2. Let's, but
for most humans, the longer the to-do list is, the less that gets done, because you just go, right?
And by the way, we'd have to have a whole separate show if you want to get me into the private equity guys, because those guys, are you nuts? Like, they overpaid for these things 3 years ago, and now because they didn't know what they were investing in, they're just buying groups left and right. And now they're like, oh my God, well, how do I get rid of this thing and give it to the next schmuck before the music stops? Right. And so we love working with our clients that are private equity backed, because those guys are starting to get it. They're like, oh, whoa, wait a minute. Okay. Like, we have an amazing vision client, and they're PE backed, and they're now buying. And they love us because our tech is going to help them scale as they go. So, but man, that whole group, you got all these smart Harvard MBAs and Wharton MBAs, and they're all sitting there in their ivory towers, buying and selling other people's dreams. And I love the fact that 3 or 4 years ago, we had a lot of clients that sold like 3 or 4 years ago. I will still reach out to them today and be like, how are you feeling right now? Right. You got the boat, you're on vacation a lot. Aren't you glad you aren't still trying to run a practice these days? Right. It is a scary thing, because it was I think for a long time, people thought healthcare was just easy, simple, turn it around business. And it's not, because again, and you already talked about this, is that people that are making those decisions have never had to live a day in revenue cycle management in healthcare. They're just looking at EBITDA and profitability. They don't understand future impact to that. Macroeconomic challenges that are out of your control, like payers that stop paying, payers are using AI to deny claims, supply costs going up, labor costs going up, labor force going virtual. They're not thinking that. And me as an entrepreneur, you will die as an entrepreneur if you're not thinking ahead. 100%. If I had allowed MedEvolve to continue on as a practice management system with an RCM service, we're not even having this conversation 3 years ago. And so we had to pivot, and we're going to continue to stay ahead of our competition, and we're going to continue to evolve, no pun intended, because that's how companies continue to grow, build, and most importantly, have the capital to service their clients in an industry that is socially challenging, and an industry that's impacting you and I.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So,
hey, look down the road a year from now. What are some things you'd like to be celebrating personally and professionally?
Well, on the personal side, I learned years and years ago to become selfless in my life. I been in recovery now for almost 8 years, and when I got sober all those 8 years ago, a lot of things have changed my life. One, being able to be not only a great businessman, visionary leader again, but really involved in my sons' lives. I've been coaching their sports since 2018. You probably can't see all those awards out there, are different things that these teams have won. So a year from now, I want to be able to ensure that I have more time to continue to be of service to others, because I feel like we have a generation now that really needs that. They need role models that can speak real to them. They need role models that can talk about, the emotional resilience required to be not only the best at their sport, but the best in life. Get away from being victims, right? That's a big concern of mine is this mentality now as well. It's not my fault. It's like, well, why would you default to that statement, right? I mean, if somebody says something to you or something happens to you, you realize your choice to have maladapted behavior as a result is on you versus allowing it to just be what is. It's not truth, right? If Andrew makes fun of me, that's just Andrew in his words. If I make that truth, then I'm going to feel bad. So I feel like this service work has allowed me, whether it's being the president of the Little League here in Del Mar, whether it's coaching travel baseball, whether it's working out with kids and getting them to start learning how to train as an athlete. Well, a lot better information we have, by the way, today than when we were growing up. It's completely changed my mentality. I always joke I probably could have played a professional sport if I had known what I know now, back then. So that's really important to me, and then on the professional side, look, I started my career out of college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. My dad said, why don't you try a consulting firm? And why don't you go with, I was either Arthur Anderson or it was a bunch of Anderson consulting guys that had started a boutique firm, in the early 90s. And he said, go with that firm because you will become really, really good at a single industry, a vertical, and you'll start to shape your future, right? From that. And it was the best advice ever. One, Arthur Anderson went out of business. I think it was a year later, thanks to the Enron stuff. But two, it actually started my career in software development. And I didn't realize it at the time. So the reason I say this is I've been obsessed with these concepts since I was in my early 20s. And I'm almost 40. I'll be 49 in February. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. But I have as much conviction today as I did back then on how we can use software and now leverage AI and automation principles to try to not only survive in this healthcare world, but to start to thrive again. So I believe it from the bottom of my heart. I actually don't even know how to quit anything that I'm passionate about. It's a true statement. People like, well, I just quit and gave up. I said, but then you didn't have enough passion. How I kept Interpoint alive when we had no money in 2008 and 2009, I'm just building debt. I'm begging friends and family to keep this thing alive. And then we end up getting a really nice exit to a public company that believed in our idea. I did it because I couldn't give up on an idea that I believed in. And it's the same mentality I have here at MedEvolve. And I'm just excited about where we'll be, a year from now and growing. And I'll tell you, it's one last thing I'll just say, is, I lost my father, this spring, and people, they asked me like, oh gosh, that's terrible. I said, I haven't had a lot of time to grieve. I think grief comes in different forms and fashion. He was an amazing man, but he wasn't a teacher verbally. My twin brother and I were talking about this, and my younger brother, we were spreading his ashes up in San Francisco last month, and we said, he didn't have to say anything for us to understand what he was telling us. And he led by example. And I just say that because this was a man who was as impressive as you can imagine 30 years ago, but gave up. And right around his mid 70s, right after COVID hit, he stopped moving, he stopped socializing, he started to just stop everything. And I will say, every one of your listeners out there, is that when we stop being of service to others, when we stop moving, when we stop socializing, especially as you get older, that's when things will literally fall apart. So I am hyper focused, even though my wife says it's impossible to get me to go do social things, which is true. I'm not a socialite like she is, but I work out every day. I'm coaching as much as I can. I'm being of service to others. Volunteer work is key. Trying to be the best leader and CEO for the company, making sure that these people feel inspired and honored and excited about the direction we're going. And just never stop moving. Life is a gift. I think, that's a overused term, but it really is, and I think with my history, coming from, addiction and getting to a point in my life now where I can be confident and public about that and help others through that stuff, it's been a blessing, and I think you and I spoke about this earlier before we started the podcast, is life happens in a line. We all have to remember as humans is there's no jumping forward or going back. Everything that happens is intentional. Now, you don't have to necessarily believe in a God or higher power, but just understand that self-will doesn't get you anywhere, right? And what happens with humans is that things happen and we interpret them as bad or good. Well, there is no such thing as bad or good, right? It's change. Change is what's happening, and we as humans then confuse ourselves by interpreting what is for what really is, right? And that has brought peace to me. There's still days where I try to control everything. I'm not going to lie. But there's a lot more days now where I'm like, well, that was funny. Yeah. What did you actually control there? And all you did was stress yourself out for a day.
Hey, perspective is everything, right? Every human being has a different filter through which they see and hear what's coming at them, because we're all the sum total of our experience and our genetic tree and our upbringing and all that. So you can have a room full of people see the same event. They do not have the same take on what just happened.
Right.
It sounds simple, but the instance of bullying or whatever we were talking about with your child there, projection, right? When somebody
100%.
comes at you, it rarely has anything to do with you.
That's right.
But in that moment, do you respond in the most positive, constructive, loving, caring way possible? It's not always that easy to do now, is it? So
it's not. And remember too, right? And I see this in youth sports now, especially now with a lot of this focus on, I can be a millionaire in college and all this, is that the children are one thing, right? These young athletes are one thing, but the parents are actually more to blame because, and the coaches, right? Is that parents and coaches also have to look at themselves and how they're interacting. I see multiple things where you realize like this interaction between a coach and an athlete or a parent and an athlete is creating trauma right now that will carry through their life if they're not careful. And you don't want that, right? You don't want that. I tell both my boys, they're totally different boys. I got a 14-year-old water polo player, surfer, just chill, can't get him down. And I love that about him, right? He gets that from his mom. And then I have my younger one who's like the baseball player, the football player, the super athlete, right? And he's a lot like me, right? He's got the anxiety, right? He's hyper focused. He doesn't want to fail. He wants to always be, the best and relentless at that pursuit. And knowing now what I know, I have different conversations with him that I wish somebody had with me when I was 10 years old and 11 years old. So it's the evolution of humans that when we recognize these things, we can actually have thoughtful conversations with our children, or in my case, the people I coach. If you are all-star baseball team, if you interviewed all 13 of those amazing kids who went really far this summer in the tournaments, they would say that, Coach Seefeld brought the mental side of the game, right? Coach Brett Wayne, who played the pros, brought all the skill. He was like the skill coach, and our other coach, Brett Church, amazing guy, right? Brought skill, brought motivation. But I really focused on the emotional resilience side of these athletes, and it paid off, right? Kids were okay when things didn't go their way, right? They let that go and they moved on to the next at bat or the next play, whatever it was. And so it does work if we're willing to have the conversations with these young folks. And I think the younger, the better.
Well, it sounds like you are rippling a lot of pools in a positive way all day long at work, and then the rest of the day and the weekend in your private life and as a parent as well. So kudos to you. I thank you for your service. Please tell our audience, where can they find MedEvolve? What's your URL and what social media outlets are you using as well?
Yeah, MedEvolve.com. That's our website. I'm sure you can put it in the show notes. Personally, I love it when people hit me up on LinkedIn. You can find me, Matt Seefeld. Talk about anything. Always like new connections and networks. I think it's important nowadays to stay in the conversation, right? You never know where conversations lead. Is that networking can always lead to things that can help us improve our personal lives or professional lives or a combination of both. And so I think it's important, but no, I'm grateful to be on your show. Love the conversation. I do a lot of these. And so, this just is easy. You're an amazing host and I love the show. I love listening to the shows that you guys have already produced, and you're top notch.
Thank you so much. We truly appreciate you spending some time with us on Business Ninjas. All the best to you and yours, both personally and professionally, and all continued success at MedEvolve, because that really does enable medical providers to treat us in a different way when their businesses are run with less stress and more profit.
Yes, I couldn't say it better.
Be well.